Good morning, everyone. This is Christina Osborne with ISO Stakeholder Affairs, and I'd like to thank you for joining the call to discuss the revisions to the board selection policy. So what we're going to do, we did post two documents out on the website, our ISO's website. One is the actual policy that shows the red line of the revisions, and then there is a document out there that is provides an overview of the changes. So you can find those and the presentation out on ISO's website. Go to the Stand Form tab, select Meetings and Events, and then select Miscellaneous Stakeholder Meetings, and you'll find the red line policy out there. What we'll do is after the policy has been finalized, then it will go onto our Legal Policies webpage, which is located under the Rules tab. So we have Greg Fisher is here. He's Lead Counsel Corporate at ISO. He's going to be presenting the material, and then we also have Bert Gross from Legal, who's on the speaker line, and then Peter Clusi, who is from External and Customer Affairs at ISO. Greg is going to provide an overview of the revisions, and what we'll do is we're going to take questions after specific sections, so if you could just jot down any questions that you have. We will be taking questions, but we'll just wait until after specific sections. And so, and then I'll go over the next steps at the very end as far as when we'd like to take stakeholder comments on the revised policy. And so we are recording the meeting today. We will make that recording available on that miscellaneous stakeholder meetings page. Look for that probably by the end of the week. We'll post it as soon as we receive it from AT&T. So I know this meeting was scheduled till noon today, but it's not likely we'll go the full length, so just wanted to give you a heads up. We do have it here ending at 11:30, and it may not even last that long, but just a heads up that it may not go the full length. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Greg Fisher.
Thanks, Christina. Good morning, everybody. This is Greg Fisher, and I am an attorney with the ISO. Part of my practice involves advising the company and the board on governance matters, including the board selection policy. I've also been a part of the ISO team that assists the Nominee Review Committee with the board selection process. This initiative is really intended to provide just some relatively minor targeted updates and refinements to the board selection policy. We believe that the selection process has been working well over the years, and that the requested amendments in this initiative, with those, the process will be improved, and stakeholders will therefore continue to want to engage in the process. You could move then, actually this is the slide I want to talk about. So first I'd like to talk about the brief history of the policy. The board selection policy was adopted in 2005 by the Board of Governors, and it provides for what we consider a robust stakeholder-driven process using a professional executive search firm to advise the governor on qualified board candidates for appointment. Back in the day, FERC accepted the policy as part of the resolution of the governance dispute that the state of California had when this was formed. And that was when the board was converted from a stakeholder board into an independent board. Sectors and candidate qualifications at the time were designed to reflect the needs at that time. Since 2005, the ISO markets and operations have obviously continued to evolve, and the proposed revisions really are meant to update the policy to reflect those changes. Next slide, please. All right. So in later slides, we will get into more detail on the changes we're proposing. Overall, there are several reasons for the proposed revisions. I'd like to go over those. First, the ISO and the stakeholder sector leads on the Nominee Review Committee gained extensive experience with the selection process over the past few years. The sector leads raised some issues with the ISO about how the sector classifications were working in practice. As a result of those discussions and our independent review of the policy, we determined that some revisions to the stakeholder qualifications and groupings were warranted to ensure that stakeholders could find a proper fit in the various sectors. We also realized that some sector descriptions used outdated and vague terminology, which we seek to address in these revisions. Further, we noticed that some of the candidates' qualifications were somewhat outdated and could benefit from some minor revisions. Okay, next slide, please. All right. In light of our discussions, we identified potential revisions in 4 overarching areas, which I'll cover in order. First, an updated introduction about the ISO and the selection process under current grid operations and our evolving market. Second, the candidate qualifications. Third, the sector formulations and descriptions. And fourth, a section that provides for flexibility with the process when incumbent board members and the governor are interested in their reappointment to the board. Next slide, please. All right. So for the introduction, we decided to enhance the introduction to the policy as a quick way to provide new stakeholders in particular with an overview of the board appointment and selection processes. This new introduction describes the ISO, the board, and the selection process and their current grid operations and market. Further, it provides an overview of the board selection policy goals, which really are to identify highly qualified candidates who have the vision and experience needed to successfully oversee the corporation and ensure its ability to meet both the current and future challenges of a rapidly evolving electric transmission grid and wholesale market. The introduction provides an overview of the ISO, its footprint and operations, the board makeup and appointment process, and the selection process, including candidate vetting and ranking for the governor's consideration. Any questions on that then? Christina, you want to take questions at this point? Hello? Hello?
Greg, this is Bert. I hear you, but I'm not hearing Christina.
I know, I'm not either. I want to continue until I can hear.
Greg?
Okay, everybody? Yes.
I was just disconnected. I apologize.
No worries. I'm just glad I waited. I felt untethered there for a second, but I'm okay.
Okay. Are there any questions?
This is a good time to pause. Yeah, thank you.
Will, are there any questions in the queue?
There are currently no questions over the phone lines at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, so here we go. Let's go to candidate qualifications. Based on stakeholder input, we provided some additional specific qualifications under the general electric industry experience due to their relevance for current operations and the future of the grid, including the 2 categories listed there, transmission grid security and grid operations, which have evolved and become that much more important. This section also adds other relevant experience in electricity and other related industries. Further, it adds experience as a legal professional, a law professor, and nonprofit management to highlight some valuable qualifications that the ISO has been fortunate on its board to have had in the past several years. It also clarifies that the qualifications listed are inclusive rather than exclusive of overall electric and related industry experience. Any questions on that?
So again, to raise your hand, press pound 2. We'll just give it a moment, and we'll let you know if anybody enters the queue, please.
All right, looks like we just have had one enter the queue.
Okay.
Your line's been unmuted.
Hey, Greg, it's Eric Eisenman. How you doing today? Thanks for doing
Good, Eric. How are you? Thank you.
Good. But before I ask my specific question, just for all the attendees, so I'm the sector lead for the TO sector. I'm with PG&E, and I have been the sector lead for quite a long number of years. So, and I'm also the co-chair of the board nominee committee. So just so everyone has that background. So, Greg, the one thing I noticed, I mean, I support everything you've got here on the candidate qualifications, is I was looking at the actual document. I did not see anything about someone like with policy expertise, and I thought that maybe we should include something like that. So that's just for your consideration.
Okay. I'll take that note. Otherwise,
that's the rest does before it. Thank you.
Okay. And are you planning to submit written comments too as well, Eric?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. All right. I'll look for that as well in there. Thank you for that, and thank you for your participation today. Any other questions?
Eric. Yep. Will, do we have anybody else in the queue?
No other questions at this time.
Okay. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right. So next up are the proposed changes to the sector groupings and descriptions. Over the next few slides, you'll see the current and the proposed sector definitions, one after the other. This slide here shows the current original sector classifications that you'll see. The transmission owners are first under the current definition, end users and retail energy providers, then public interest groups, alternative energy providers, transmission-dependent utilities, and then generators and marketers. That's the current list in the policy today. And if you could go then to the next slide.
Sure, hold on.
Actually, if you could go back, I'm sorry, go back to that first slide. Thank you. So we saw two issues here. The terminology is dated. For example, transmission-dependent utilities is not terminology that is used currently. And as you can see, none of this discusses the distinction between entities that are inside or outside of the California ISO balancing authority area, which has caused confusion about which sectors and entities outside of the BAA should join in order to participate in the selection process. So two main things are happening with our proposed changes. If you go to the next slide. So we're updating the terminology and providing reference to the distinction between entities that are inside the balancing authority area and those that are outside. So these next two slides, including this one, include the 6 sectors that have our proposed changes. The first sector changes the undefined term transmission owners into the defined term participating transmission owners as contained in the tariff. The purpose of this change is to distinguish between transmission owners within the ISO BAA that have turned over their transmission assets to the ISO control and other types of entities who happen to own transmission but have not yet have not turned over those assets to the ISO's control. The best example of that are EIM entities. As you'll see on the next slide, we've created a sector that would include EIM entities and other EIM participants. If you actually go back to the slide before, please. Sorry.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah, just stay there. Thanks. I was just alluding to the next one. So in the second category, we made 2 changes here. Terms not prevalent then are now included. For example, community choice aggregators and electric service providers. And we made clear that the sector for end users and LSEs that are within the ISO BAA. For those entities that fall outside of the ISO BAA, the new sector later in the next slide, don't go there yet, covering IM entities and participants. We'll cover those. In the third category, we've simply clarified that public interest groups should be ones that are actually involved in energy issues pertaining to the ISO. That's a little distinction there. In the current sectors, we distinguish between those entities that use all alternative technologies or renewable energy and traditional generators such as those who use fossil fuels. There are currently 2 sectors that are roughly, that's current in the policy, 2 sectors that are roughly divided along those lines. Because there are now very few companies that exclusively own traditional fossil fuel resources, we felt it was better to merge these 2 categories into a single sector that include all types of energy providers and marketers. This new fourth sector then also explicitly includes new types of stakeholders that have come into existence since 2005, such as the community choice aggregators and the like. Consistent with other categories, we've also limited this sector to those who are located inside the ISO BAA and that engage in transactions with those inside the ISO BAA. Now you can go to the next slide, please. So the fifth sector currently refers to transmission-dependent utilities, which is a term that is not really as commonly used today as it was back in 2005. Because all of the entities that are transmission-dependent utilities also fall within the category of publicly owned utilities, we decided to change the term to publicly owned utilities. Once again, this category is limited to those that are within the ISO BAA and engage in transactions within the ISO BAA. And finally, but not least, for the sixth sector, as I alluded to before, we recognize the need for a sector for those entities located outside the ISO BAA that do transact with the ISO. This would include the EIM entities, other EIM participants, as well as other entities from outside the ISO BAA that happen to transact power with the ISO. Now would be a good time for questions.
Okay. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand by pressing pound 2, and we'll let you know if anybody enters the queue. Give it a moment.
Christina, be prepared to go back and forth if you could between these two slides.
Not a problem. Let me know.
Thank you.
All right. It's not looking like we have any questions in the queue at the moment.
Great.
All right. So we'll move on.
Okay, thanks. So some other minor clarifications were also added to this section of the policy, including requirement that stakeholders that qualify for participation in more than one sector must select one sector and then participate only in that sector. We also added some flexibility on the required number of stakeholders for each sector. Under the current policy and the process, there are supposed to be 6 participants from each sector on the nominee review committee. At times, smaller sectors have had difficulty identifying and getting 6 participants to take part in the process. Given that issue, that unique issue, we've added language that would allow the sector to have fewer than 6 participants in their sector, with so long as stakeholders in that sector have been given the opportunity to participate. And that's a change I think that will be well received by those small sectors. All right. Next slide, please.
Sure.
All right, so finally, we've added some flexibility with the process when incumbent board members and the governor are interested in their reappointment. Section 4.3, which is a new section, would allow for the ISO to adjust the selection processes as needed when board member reappointment is likely. This flexibility will be based on input by the governor's office and the board nominee review committee. And with that, that concludes my formal presentation. We'll be happy to answer questions. If not, thanks for your time and participation.
Yeah, so we'll go ahead and open up for questions again. If you're having trouble entering the queue, you're also welcome to send me a question via the chat. But if you do have a question, just press pound 2 to raise your hand. No questions, Will?
No questions at the moment.
Okay. So the next steps, we are taking stakeholder comments on the revisions to the board selection policy. Again, those documents are out on the miscellaneous stakeholder meetings webpage. So you'll find the red line version as well as the document that provides an overview of the changes. And you're going to submit those comments to the initiative comments at kaiser.com mailbox. I apologize, this link on the bottom is incorrect, but the presentation that's out on the website doesn't include this link. So, so with that, I'll provide one more opportunity for questions. Didn't think we'd wrap up this early, but
we're very efficient here.
Exactly.
All right, no questions in the queue.
Okay.
Hey,
Well,
thank you,
if there are
everybody.
any questions, any questions following the call, you're welcome to send those to the initiative comments mailbox, and I'll make sure that Greg gets them. So thank you all for joining us. Greatly appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your day.